It's been a few weeks since I've been out for a hike, so I made sure to make this a good one. In fact, this is so far the best hike of the year for me. In this video, we're climbing the CMD Arête. If you're not familiar with the Arête, it's a long knife-edge ridge route on the northeast side of Ben Nevis. So following along the route we took, you first summit CMD, scramble over the Arête, and then summit Ben Nevis itself. At 1,345 metres, Ben Nevis is of course the highest mountain in the United Kingdom. So this is a long route, and in poor weather conditions it can take a long time to complete. It took us 10 hours and 45 minutes. But, as you can see, we climbed on a very wet and boggy day. So the start of this video shows us squelching through the mud. This was recorded in the last week of October, so at this time of the year, the weather is very unpredictable. Just a few days ago, Ben Nevis was covered in snow, but today it is covered in rain. As we approached the summit of CMD, the ground turned gradually firmer underfoot and eventually became rocks for the hike across the Arête, which is much nicer than the mud. The hike to the summit of the CMD itself is quite a challenge before you even make it to the ridge. CMD is 1,220 metres tall, so it's quite an ascent to get you started. For comparison, the highest mountain in England is only 978 metres tall. As we approached the first summit, we passed into the cloud layer, where we would spend the rest of the day. Personally, I do actually quite like scrambling across ridges in thick clouds. I think it makes it look more otherworldly, more eerie. It's funny when people see the footage, as they always say it's such a shame the clouds are so low, but it's not for me. I climb mountains for the views, but I climb ridges for the climb. Here you can see we're approaching the start of the Arête, and the ground gets narrower as we go, and it'll become more rocky. It is essentially a sheer drop on each side, but it builds you up to it, and you get used to it as you walk, as it slowly becomes narrow over time. It's the same for the scrambling. You're just walking at first, and then the further across the ridge you make it, the more you'll be using your hands. The clouds did raise once or twice as we crossed, so we did catch a little bit of the views. The view of the north face is particularly good. But like I said, I'm here for the scramble up the Arête, and it was fantastic. In truth, though, it's not a difficult scramble. I'd say Striding Edge on Helvellyn is a little harder, and Crib Goch on Snowdon is much more technically challenging. Presuming they're not scared of heights, I'd say any hiker fit enough to make the ascent could cross the Arête. That said, it is dangerous. In high winds or in the wet, there is a real chance of falling. But just take it slow. Stick to the low ground in the challenging areas, and you'll be fine. You might have noticed that in the 6 hours it took us to summit Ben Nevis, we never actually passed another person. In fact, we didn't so much as see another person on the nearby trails, right up until we hit the summit. In fairness, we did record this early on a Monday morning, so no doubt that impacted the number of hikers just a bit. But, as usual, the summit of Nevis was still pretty busy. As you can see, the Arête is very long, and it'll take you a while to cross it, but it was the absolute highlight of the day for me. There's a few spots, and no doubt you'll see them in this video, where at a distance it looks impassable, like you'll have to climb down a little way to get across. But honestly, you can just step along the ridge the whole way if you want to. That said, there isn't a wider, lower track if you lose your nerve, or if the wind is against you. Luckily, the rain stopped for the first half of the Arête, so we could chat and climb casually. However, as we approached Nevis, the rain came back and the wind got pretty strong. It was strong enough that we couldn't always hear each other speak. Once you reach the Nevis side, it's a straight scramble up the big rocks. There is no real trick to it. At the end of the Arête, you're a couple of 100 metres short of the summit of Nevis, so we just shot a bearing and started climbing. At this point, I was pretty surprised that neither of us felt very tired. As we reached the Nevis side, we both commented on how warm we felt and how we felt that we still had a lot of energy in the tank. But in fairness, crossing the Arête isn't strenuous. The challenge is really only psychological, for those who don't like heights. And once you reach the summit of Nevis, that's it. You're done. You can stop, you can take a break. The shelter's up there, or you can head straight back down. We descended via the far side, the mountain path, which is a much, much easier route than the ridge. You could easily turn around and head back over the Arête if you wanted to, but instead we descended on the opposite side, down to the halfway lochen, and we used the north face path to traverse back across towards the CMD to get us on the right side, to get back to the car park. At some point you are going to have to deal with the river. You could either continue hiking all the way back up to the CIC hut, and then you could effectively walk around the source of the river, or, like us, you could cut across the open ground and just ford the river. It was a wet day, so the river was pretty wide, but if you're careful and you look around, there's some safe places to ford it. Although it doesn't look like much on the camera, this was actually one of the hardest parts of the day. Crossing from the north path back over to the CMD side, we're not walking on a track here, and it's pretty deep grass and it was very, very wet. So, whilst you might save a little distance in cutting across, it's probably no faster. Certainly in the bad weather, it was probably no faster than just taking the track all the way around. And once you're back on the right side of the river, you're just heading along the track back towards the woodland, where the North Face car park is. In the last week of October, there's about 10 hours of light in the day, and this hike took us 11 hours. So we set off nice and early, it was dark when we started hiking, we had head torches, but thankfully we beat sunset, we got back to the car before the sun went down, and honestly, this is my favourite hike of the year so far. I would strongly recommend it.